Chapter 481. Gu Shengyin didn't know how long she had slept for. When she woke up, the leaves of the elven mother tree rustled and circles of green light fell on her body, replenishing her body's energy. This was the holy land of the elves. Gu Shengyin sat up and found that she was lying in a crystal-like rectangular coffin. Was she the Sleeping Beauty? She thought in amusement. System, how long have I been asleep? She asked. At that time, she recognized that the so-called human Emperor Wu Xin was actually a fake. Looking at the situation, the real Wu Xin had probably been assassinated long ago. She didn't know where that person came from. She and Beemans were only able to fight to a draw with him. Although they had the upper hand, they couldn't do anything to him. There had never been an expert of this level in the fantasy magic continent. In the end, she had Beemans cover for her and used the elven race's strongest forbidden spell to kill that Wu Xin. However, the two of them had paid a heavy price. Beemans had to recuperate and she had no choice but to fall into a deep sleep because she had exhausted her magic. Host, you have been asleep for 1,000 years. The system answered her question. Gu Shengyin was shocked. It's actually been that long? Your Majesty! A surprised and unfamiliar voice appeared beside her ear. Gu Shengyin looked over with some confusion. It was a male elf she had never seen before. Like Helena, he had light green hair that reached his waist. His light green eyes were purer than the sky and were filled with pure joy. His skin was white and his appearance was more exquisite and beautiful than any elf Gu Shengyin had ever seen. She felt that his aura hadn't reached adulthood yet. Could it be that he was a newly born elf while she was asleep? Seeing the unfamiliarity in Gu Shengyin's eyes, the elf's eyes dimmed as if he was sad. Your Majesty, you don't even remember me. Ever since the Queen had fallen asleep, he would come to the Holy Land almost every day to see if the Queen had woken up. The starlight flower made by Gu Shengyin's magic had always been placed in his bedroom. Every day, the first thing Alan Eyre did when he woke up was to see if the flower had bloomed. However, 1 year had passed, 10 years had passed, and 100 years had passed. Little Alan had slowly grown up, and in a few days, he would reach his 1,000th birthday. He would officially be an adult, but there was still no sign of Her Majesty waking up. When he woke up this morning, he habitually looked at a certain spot at the head of the bed. He thought he was hallucinating. The starlight flower that had been dormant for 1,000 years had actually bloomed. In the early morning light, the pure white bud had completely bloomed. The little star-like stamen swayed gently in the breeze, as if it was saying good morning to him. Alan could swear to the goddess of nature that this was the most beautiful starlight flower he had ever seen in his life. Realizing something, Allenby rushed to the Holy Land with a nervous and expectant mood. He hoped to see what he wanted to see, but he was afraid that it was just an extravagant hope. He stepped into the Holy Land, and from afar, he saw the person sitting up straight under the mother elven tree. 1,000 years had passed, and Her Majesty still looked the same as before she fell asleep. The child who liked to pester her and ask for hugs had already grown up. Chapter 482. Looking at the depressed look of the elf in front of her, Gu Shengyin looked at him carefully. The more she looked at him, the more familiar she felt his face was. A small figure suddenly appeared in the depths of her mind. Gu Shengyin suddenly thought of something. Alina? Sure enough, when the elf opposite her heard her call this name, he raised his head in surprise and showed her a happy smile. Alina was pleasantly surprised. Your Majesty still remembers me. Gu Shengyin wanted to cover her chest for a moment. This child had such a pure and beautiful face that it was otherworldly. Now that she showed such a trusting and joyful smile, even Gu Shengyin, who was used to seeing beauties, wanted to say, that's cheating. Not to mention, this child who looked so well-behaved and delicate was raised by her. Gu Shengyin immediately felt guilty that he hadn't recognized her at the first moment. I just didn't think that my Alan would grow so big after just one night of sleep. Gu Shengyin slowly stood up. As she stood up, the crystal-like thing disappeared. She walked to Alina's side and found that although this delicate child looked weak and slender, he was actually taller than her. My Alina, you should be coming of age soon, right? she asked with a smile. When Alinor heard the words, "My Alinor," from her mouth, he only felt his heart, without knowing why, beat fast. His face couldn't help but blush a little. A pink glow spread on his white jade-like skin, extremely moving. Gu Shengyin happened to tilt his head and saw this scene. He could not help but sigh in his heart again. I don't know what Killian's heart is made of. How could she be willing to use such a person like Alan Eyre? When Alinor heard that the Queen still remembered his coming-of-age ceremony, he was even more happy in his heart. Next month is the time. Her Majesty could come to his coming-of-age ceremony in person. He only felt that he could stand by the Queen's side and do nothing extra, and he could feel incomparably happy and peaceful. This kind of feeling, even if his talent was praised by the entire clan, could not compare. He even thought that it would be great if time could stop at this moment forever. He would always be by the Queen's side, and no one would disturb them. Unfortunately, the two of them didn't spend much time together. The news of the Elven Queen's awakening spread throughout the Elven tribe in a short period of time. All the elves spontaneously came to the Holy Land to express their most sincere blessings to the Queen. Alinor stood aside and watched the Queen smiling at the other elves with the same gentle and tolerant smile. He watched as the Queen looked at everyone with a gentle and caring gaze. Her gentleness belonged to all elves. He had never seen this matter so clearly before. This matter made him very unhappy. All the elves said that Alinor, the most beautiful and talented elf besides the Queen, was a very generous and kind elf. His character was as good as his appearance, and he was as noble as described in the hymns. But only he knew that he was generous, tolerant, and kind because he never cared about those things. He was actually very selfish. The things that they truly cared about were things that they were unwilling to share with other elves. For example, the Queen's gentleness and love. Chapter 483. Alinor. A worried call made him come back to his senses. Alinor looked up and found that the elves around him had left. Only the Queen was standing by the side looking at him. He quickly revealed a shy smile and said, "I was distracted just now." Gu Shengyin smiled knowingly. The child has grown up and has his own worries. The elves held a huge celebration for the Queen's awakening. Even Beemans, who was far away in the Dragon Valley in the north, sent a messenger to congratulate her. Everything was good, except for Alinor, which made Gu Shengyin a little annoyed. This child was going to be an adult soon. Why was he still so dependent on her? Every morning, when Gu Shengyin woke up, the first thing the head maid beside her reported was, "His Highness is waiting for you to have breakfast together." Alinor was by her side almost every day except for the time to rest at night. He was very talented. Now that he had mastered all the natural magic in the elves, he no longer needed to learn with the elders, so he had a lot of time to pester her. Every time Gu Shengyin helplessly hinted that he should go out and communicate with the elves more, Alinor would look at her with a particularly heart-wrenching gaze, making her have no choice but to admit defeat. What was even more frustrating was that Alinor was very popular among the elves. Even the head maid said to Gu Shengyin in private, "His Highness' reaction is normal. You are his guardian, but he fell into an unknown slumber when he was closest to you. His Highness has been here for so many years. Although he didn't show anything on his face, I don't know how sad and scared he is in his heart. Now that you have woken up, it is natural for him to stick to you." Gu Shengyin also felt that the child might be uneasy in his heart. He had to look at her every day to feel at ease. Today, she sat on the high elven throne, and Alinor sat on the side playing the harp for her. When it came to the harp, she had to praise Alinor's talent again. His talent was not only reflected in magic, but also in music, painting, and other artistic things. The results he showed also surprised Gu Shengyin. Such an elf was simply the most beloved child of the goddess of nature. The more outstanding he was, the more Gu Shengyin felt sorry for Alan in the original plot. She secretly made a decision in her heart. When Alan grew up, she would teach him some common sense. She must not let him be bewitched by that human girl, Celia. Such a beautiful Alan should not have such a miserable ending. "Ellen," she suddenly said. The melodious music stopped, and Alan looked at her with a smile. Queen, what present do you want for your coming-of-age celebration in a few days? Alan tilted his head and seemed to be thinking seriously. From Gu Xingyi's angle, she could see half of his exquisite and beautiful side profile. He was simply the most perfect creation of nature. After thinking for a while, Alinur shook his head and looked seriously at Gu Xingyi. Alinur used to think that during the coming-of-age ceremony, he would make a wish to the goddess of nature, hoping that your majesty could wake up sooner. Now that you have woken up, Alinur can accompany you every day. For Alinur, this is the most perfect life. Alinur has no other wish. In fact, there was, but that kind of wish was too shocking, so Alinur did not dare to say it. He was afraid that if the queen knew about his selfish thoughts, she would hate him. Chapter 484. Gu Shengyin felt that Alinur was so well behaved that it made her heart ache. Sure enough, he was a naive and pure elf. He didn't even have any excessive requests. However, the more Alinur said this, the more Gu Shengyin felt that as his guardian, she must do something for him. Soon, it was Alinur's coming-of-age ceremony. Like every elf's coming-of-age ceremony, Alinur's coming-of-age ceremony was set in the Holy Land. However, it was different from the usual coming-of-age ceremony. A few years ago, an elf elder resigned from his position as an elder of the clan because he wanted to concentrate on studying ancient books. As the most talented elf in the past 10,000 years, Alan was promoted to the position of the new elder of the elf race. This was the same as the original plot. He became the youngest elder in the history of the elves. None of the elves felt jealous. On the contrary, they were all happy for Alinur. Looking at the unfake happiness and blessings on the faces of her clansmen, Gu Xingyi's heart was very clear. No wonder the world praised the elves so much. Although the elves had some strange habits, their hearts were undoubtedly the purest and cleanest among all the races in the magic continent. However, this was also related to the fact that they had been living in the Starlight Forest without worries. Alinur stood in the middle of everyone. There was a very senior elf in the clan who dipped a branch from the mother tree in the purest holy water from the spring of life and touched his forehead. This was the blessing from the mother tree. Under the gaze of all the elves, Alinur's appearance suddenly changed. His general outline was still the same, but his originally delicate and beautiful androgynous face began to become more angular and defined. His figure also grew a little taller, and his eyes became sharp. His shoulders were also broader. Although he still looked like Alinur and was still incomparably beautiful, no one would mistake him for a woman anymore. He really changed from a teenager to a man. Next, it was the main point of the coming-of-age ceremony. The respected elders in the clan put on a woven crown for Alinur and told others that this was an adult elf. Generally, the female elf's crown was a starlight flower crown. The male elves, on the other hand, wore a crown made of thorny leaves and leaves from the mother tree. For the elves, this was an extremely solemn ceremony. All of the elves remained silent in unison, waiting to witness this scene unfold. However, the elder who was supposed to wear the crown for Alan quietly retreated. Not far away, the elven queen was holding an exquisite leaf crown in her hands as she slowly walked over. Alan couldn't help but widen his eyes. Could it be? Thinking of a certain possibility, a hint of anticipation and excitement appeared on his calm expression. The elves around also reacted. Was the queen going to put the crown on Alinur's head herself? Many of them looked at Alinur enviously. What a great honor this was. Alinur was really a lucky elf. Gu Shengyin stood in front of Alinur. This child, after the coming-of-age ceremony, had grown taller again. She had to raise her head to look at him. These are the thorny leaves and holy leaves that I personally picked. It took me 3 days and nights to weave them. I cast protection and blessing magic on it. I hope it will bring you good luck and happiness. Chapter 485. Alinur lowered his head and let the queen put the crown on his head. The two of them were very close, and Alinur could smell the faint fragrance of the queen's body. It did not belong to any plant that he knew, and it was the scent that belonged to the queen. Gu Shengyin took a step back and looked at her work with satisfaction. Compared to before, the male elf who had tied his hair behind his head had a valiant feel to him. She smiled and gently opened her mouth, completing the last step of the coming-of-age ceremony. The powerful and beautiful goddess of nature, you brought the sun, rain, and breeze to the earth. The grass sprouted under your feet, and the flowers bloomed in your hands. All the elves followed their queen and sang the praises of the goddess of nature. The elves believed in the most gentle and beautiful goddess. They believed that the elves, who were closest to nature, were created by this goddess. At this moment, Gu Shengyin realized that something was wrong. She looked at Alinur in surprise. If she did not react in time, she would have lost her composure. Her lover in this world was actually... When the last step of Alinur's coming-of-age ceremony was completed, a familiar throbbing came from the depths of her soul. The development of this fact was somewhat unexpected to her. She looked at Alinur with a strange gaze. Could it be that the elves had a special physique, so before coming of age, she did not recognize him? System, you should have known that Alinur was him, right? The system admitted very quickly, yes, host. Gu Shengyin laughed angrily, but you didn't tell me. Even when she mistakenly thought that her lover was the Emperor or the Golden Dragon, the system did not stand up and tell her. The system's tone was very righteous. Host, you did not ask me. This is not part of my job scope. Gu Shengyin. I don't want to talk to you now. Please let me be alone. System. Gu Shengyin was a little troubled. She watched Alinur grow up, and looking at the way he relied on her, it was obvious that he was facing a trusted elder. Such an obedient child, she did not have the heart to do anything to him. Allenby felt that ever since his coming-of-age ceremony, Her Majesty had been looking at him strangely. Whether it was when he was communicating with her or when he was playing the harp for her, she would often look at him with an inexplicable gaze, as if she was somewhat conflicted. Alan felt a little uneasy. Could it be that Her Majesty doesn't like my adult appearance? She preferred the soft and adorable type who would tug at her sleeves and act coquettishly. Unfortunately, one's appearance was not something one could control, and there was no way for him to revert back to his previous appearance. Alan Eyre thought with some distress. If Gu Shengyin knew what he was thinking, she would probably stop him immediately. Please don't. If it was raising a child, it wouldn't be a problem to raise an obedient, delicate, and cute child. But if it was a lover, that scene was really too much to imagine. However, Gu Shengyin was soon attracted by another matter. In this world, Shi Lily, the human girl with the protagonist aura, was born. Gu Shengyin had been paying special attention to the town where Shi Lily was born, and there were no abnormalities. Even when she was born, she was no different from an ordinary child. She did not show any heaven-defying luck at this time. Then, when exactly did Shi Lily start plundering the path of providence? Chapter 486. There was nothing more reassuring than personally verifying it. Moreover, Gu Shengyin brought Allenby with her when she went to the human world. Although she knew that he had become her lover in this world and didn't have to worry about being attracted to and deceived by Cecily like in the original plot, Gu Shengyin still planned to bring him to the human world to see it for himself. Gu Shengyin cast a disguise spell on herself and Allenby. It couldn't be helped. The two of them were simply too eye-catching, and their long green hair and green eyes simply revealed their identities as elves. After the disguise spell was cast, the two of them looked just like ordinary humans with good looks. Although they were still a little eye-catching, they wouldn't cause any trouble. Queen! Helena, what are we doing here? Allenby was still very unaccustomed to directly calling the queen by her name. The elven queen was a figure of worship among the elves. To directly call the queen by her name was simply too much and unforgivable in the eyes of the elves. Gu Shengyin spent a lot of effort, and Allenby himself had a little secret in his heart, to finally get Allenby to agree to directly call her by her name. Gu Shengyin also had her own selfish motives. If her lover didn't even dare to call her by her name, how could she expect him to do anything more disgraceful? I feel that this human baby girl is very unusual, so I specially came to take a look. Gu Shengyin replied. They were standing in a clothing shop in the town. Beside them, a lady was choosing fabric with a maid, and behind her, another maid was carrying a baby. It was Cecily. Unusual? Allenby carefully looked at the baby girl a few times, and didn't find anything wrong with her. However, a sense of vigilance rose in his heart. Her Majesty couldn't have taken a fancy to this baby, right? Although in his eyes, this baby girl wasn't beautiful at all, and couldn't even compare to any little elf in the Starlight Forest, what if the Queen liked her? He didn't want another person to compete with him for the Queen's favor. He was the only elf raised by the Queen, and he was unique. Gu Shengyin didn't expect that Allenby would imagine so many things by himself, and even be wary of a baby like Cecily. Although the process was a bit ridiculous, she had achieved her goal. This way, it was even more impossible for Allenby to get close to Cecily. The two of them settled down as siblings in this small town called Locke. Originally, Gu Shengyin wanted to directly say that they were husband and wife, but this would probably scare Allenby. Slowly, they still had a lot of time, the lifespan of elves. Cecily grew, growing day by day, she didn't show any differences from other children's children. Gu Shengyin was now certain that she must have encountered some kind of fortuitous encounter at some point in time. It was very likely that she had obtained some kind of item or cultivation method that gave her the ability to plunder the providence of others. This was not mentioned in the original plot. At the beginning of the plot, Cecily was already a famous genius girl in the magic fantasy continent. All of this depended on Gu Shengyin to figure out by herself. Chapter 487. When Shi Lily was 6 years old, Gu Shengyin finally found a clue. Shi Lily was a very lucky girl. She was born into a wealthy family in a small town. Her parents doted on her since she was a child, and she had no siblings to compete with. This also formed her mischievous character. One day, she secretly got rid of the maid who was in charge of looking after her and secretly ran to an abandoned house in her hometown. Creak, the dilapidated door was opened a crack, and a small figure sneaked into the old house that no one had entered for a long time. The thick layer of dust, the messy mess, and the things that ordinary people would hate and avoid were like a small treasure trove to Shi Lily at this moment. She found a broken rusty sword, a bronze mirror with simple patterns, and some other small things. A bottle in the corner aroused her interest. She laboriously moved away the obstacles around her, and her small body crawled in and took out the bottle. This was a very strange glass bottle. It was transparent, but there was a dark and mysterious unknown black substance inside, which looked like gas. If Shi Lily was not a 6-year-old girl, but an adult, she would definitely treat such a thing with caution. At least, she would not open it rashly. However, Shi Lily was not. She just looked at the bottle and found it very interesting. Without hesitation, she directly threw it to the ground. It did not break. This aroused her interest even more. The small child took out the broken sword she had just collected and slashed at the glass bottle, but it still did not break. She tried many methods, such as throwing, knocking, hitting, but it was useless. The bottle still did not move. Shi Lily pouted and was about to cry. She sat on the ground angrily, but accidentally touched the broken sword with her hand. A drop of blood just happened to slide down her finger and dripped on the bottle. Shi Lily, who was suddenly injured, really cried this time. She no longer cared about the bottle and the broken sword, and ran out crying. No one knew that the drops of blood on the bottle had slowly seeped into the bottle bit by bit. Then, the bottle that Shi Lily couldn't open no matter what she did actually shattered just like that. A black stream of air floated out from the bottle, and condensed into the shape of a human face in the air. It seemed to be judging something, and then it chased in the direction Shi Lily left. It quickly caught up with Shi Lily and then went into her body. Shi Lily, who was running, suddenly stopped. Her face suddenly twisted, and her eyes suddenly became pitch black. A strange smile appeared on her young face. After that, everything seemed to return to normal. "Miss, where have you been?" The panicked maid saw Shi Lily, and sighed in relief. "I saw a kitten just now. It went over there." Shi Lily pointed in a random direction. Her hand's fingers were clearly cut by the broken sword, but now there were no marks. The maid was not in the mood to care about the kitten. She bent down, picked up She Lily, and walked in the direction of the house. "Madam is still waiting for you to go back and have dinner with us." She did not see that She Lily, who was in her arms, showed a strange smile. Chapter 488. Gu Shengyin did not expect that in such a short period of time, something would happen. The system did notice this. However, compared to everything in this world, it was an illusory body and could not do anything. By the time it notified Gu Shengyin, the black gas had already entered Cecily's body. This black gas must be the source of Cecily's protagonist aura? Gu Shengyin guessed. That night, she cast a concealment spell on herself and came to Cecily's room. Her small body sank into the bedding and she seemed to be sleeping very soundly. She looked just like a normal human little girl. Just as Gu Shengyin was about to step forward and carefully examine her body, Cecily, who was sleeping on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes. That look. That was definitely not something a 6-year-old child should have. Gu Shengyin immediately made that judgment. She watched as Cecily got off the bed and walked towards a room at the side. She simply followed behind her, intending to see what this Cecily wanted to do. Beside Cecily's room was the room of the maid who was in charge of taking care of her. Gu Shengyin watched as She Lily pushed open the door and walked straight to the maid's bed as if no one was around. She reached her hand into the maid's bedding and pulled out the maid's hand from under the bedding. She pressed the maid's hand against her own small palm. Seeing this, Gu Shengyin seemed to have understood something. She silently chanted an incantation and extended her index finger to each of her eyes. Sure enough, this time she could clearly see that there was an inconspicuous qi flowing from the maid's body through their palms and into Cecily's body. She Lily's immature face revealed a very satisfied expression. For such an expression to appear on a little girl of her age, it must be said that it was very strange. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment. She reached out her hand and quietly pointed outside. Clang! The sound of something falling to the ground could be heard. Then, an impatient voice could be heard. "Who is it? It's the middle of the night." Then someone seemed to get up. She Lily seemed to be shocked. She looked at the maid reluctantly and retracted her hand, allowing the maid's hand to land heavily on the bed. Throughout the entire process, the maid showed no signs of waking up. Gu Shengyin watched as She Lily quickly left the maid's room and returned to her own room. She walked up to the maid and used magic to check her body. There was nothing wrong with the maid's body. It seemed that Cecily's actions had no effect on her body. She took one last look at the maid sleeping soundly on the bed and left. Returning to the courtyard where she lived, Gu Shengyin was surprised to find Alinor standing at her door. 6 years had passed. This child, no, this man's eyes had not changed at all. However, his eyes were getting deeper and deeper. He was no longer the naive elf who could be seen through at a glance. Gu Shengyin was comforted by this. Whether Alinor was her lover or not, after being the elf queen for so many years, Gu Shengyin hoped that these pure and beautiful elves would be more careful. Otherwise, when something really happened, they would be at a disadvantage. "Your Majesty?" Alinor did not ask anything. He just stared at her, making Gu Shengyin feel a lot of pressure. Chapter 489. Gu Shengyin thought for a while and told Alan about She Lily in a very vague way. Of course, she could not say anything about the plot and Elenmere. She just said that she was lucky enough to see the future under the holy tree. This human girl called Cecily would bring a great disaster to the elven race, so she came to have a look. Elenmere was speechless for a long time. His first reaction was to heave a sigh of relief. Her Majesty was not interested in that human. Immediately, he realized how selfish his thoughts were. At this moment, he was only thinking about his own affairs. Compared to the disaster of the entire elven race, the latter was obviously much more important. He hurriedly asked, "Have you found the reason?" Gu Shengyin shook her head and said, "I have a clue, but I haven't found the real reason." It was already very late, and Gu Shengyin did not say much to Ellen Mere. The two of them went to rest. The next day, there was a rumor that a maid in Cecily's house was almost hit by a carriage when she went out. Fortunately, the coachman reined in the horse, and she was only slightly scratched. However, it was not over yet. When the maid went to buy something, a scabbard flew out of a weapon shop and hit her head. When she went to the clinic for treatment, she stepped on something on the ground and broke her leg. Everyone in the small town wondered if the maid had done something wrong and angered the gods. Otherwise, how could there be so many coincidences? The maid was also very scared. Even when she was carried to the clinic, she kept putting her hands together and praying to the gods. When Gu Shengyin heard the news, she frowned. Sure enough, from this time, Cecily had begun to rob others of their luck. No, was this She Lily the real She Lily? Or was it two different names? To really figure out this matter, she had to find the source directly. Gu Shengyin acted like a strong person that night. She forced the sleeping Cecily to a deserted place. She put Cecily on the ground. I know you're awake, no need to pretend, Gu Shengyin said lightly. She Lily's eyes trembled. She opened her eyes and glanced at Gu Shengyin. Then, she looked around and burst into tears. Who are you? Where is this place? I want to find my mother. Gu Shengyin gave her acting skills a thumbs up in his heart. If she had not seen with her own eyes how she robbed others of their luck in the middle of the night, she would have been fooled. Don't cry, I know you're not Cecily. Who are you? When he said this, Gu Shengyin used his magic power. His voice seemed to directly question one's soul, causing one's expression to turn cold. She Lily put away her expression and looked at Gu Shengyin seriously for the first time. However, she used camouflage magic. In this world, not many people could see through the camouflage magic of the Elven Queen. Cecily knew in her heart that this person was more powerful than she thought, so she stopped pretending. Why would a person like you come to a place like Lock Town? And why would you target a poor person like me? Poor person? Gu Shengyin sneered. No, you're not a poor person. You're just good at turning ordinary people into poor people. She exposed what the person in front of her was doing. Chapter 490. She Lily's expression changed. She looked at Gu Shengyin cautiously. I just want to live. I'm not in your way. Why do you have to force me? Gu Shengyin did not listen to her quibbling. How could the words of a person who relied on hurting others to strengthen herself be credible? She raised her hand and a light green barrier enveloped the two of them. She remembered that, in the training materials that the system gave her, there were many examples of people who died from talking too much. So this time, she was too lazy to talk nonsense with this She Lily. She raised her hand and an extremely beautiful silver longbow appeared in her left hand. She placed her right hand on the bowstring. A light green arrow slowly formed at the tip of her finger. Elf. She Lily's expression turned ugly. She clearly recognized which race this skill came from. Gu Shengyin loosened his grip, and the arrow with powerful destructive power whizzed toward She Lily. She Lily felt the power contained in it, and her expression turned ugly. However, she could not use it at all in the enchantment, so she could only flee in a sorry state. Everyone says that the elf race is the kindest race that does not kill. Why won't you let an innocent person like me go? She continued to argue. Gu Shengyin ignored her and shot another arrow through the air. Wait. You don't want to care about this little girl's life? If this arrow hits me, I can guarantee that I won't necessarily die, but this little girl will definitely be finished. She Lily saw that the other party didn't care about her at all, so she finally shouted out her trump card. As expected, Gu Shengyin's hand stopped moving. There's a chance. She Lily's eyes lit up. She finally had the time to catch her breath and continued, I don't know what your relationship with this little girl is, but I'm sure you don't want to see her die like this. I can promise that as long as you promise to let me go, I will make sure that she is unharmed and will leave far away, never to disturb her life again. Gu Shengyin seemed to think for a moment. She Lily also looked at her nervously. Okay, Gu Shengyin decided. She looked at Cecily and said, I can agree to your request, but you must swear that you will never harm Cecily, and you will never approach this town again. She Lily's eyes lit up, and she quickly nodded. No problem. It seemed that this little girl was very important to this elf. If he could make use of her. Various thoughts flashed through She Lily's mind. All of a sudden, Gu Shengyin spoke up, Make a magic oath now. Use the words you just said. Cecily was not surprised. She nodded and stretched out 3 fingers on her right hand. In the name of the gods. Just as she started to speak, a sudden change occurred. A meteor-like arrow pierced through her chest at an unstoppable speed. Ah! 2 screams suddenly came from the small body. Gu Shengyin could clearly hear that one of the voices was Cecily, and the other was a mature woman's voice. It should be the person she had just dealt with. Gu Shengyin saw a trace of black smoke drifting out of Cecily's body. It danced in the air for a while before disappearing into thin air. She was relieved. It was finally over. Previously, she pretended to agree to this person's request to numb her, so that she could give her a fatal blow when she was most relaxed. She slowly walked toward Cecily, who was lying on the ground, took out a bottle of the Spring of Life from her sleeve, and gently poured it on the wound in front of her chest. As if a miracle had happened, the wound began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a short moment, it was as good as new. Gu Shengyin picked up Cecily's small figure and left. However, she did not notice that after she left, a thin black fog suddenly appeared in the originally empty place. The fog condensed into the shape of a human face in the air. It looked to the direction Gu Shengyin left with resentment, and then walked away. Chapter 491. Gu Shengyin sent little She Lily back to her home, and no one noticed anything unusual. Looking at the innocent She Lily who was sleeping soundly, Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, this matter was resolved. She returned to the courtyard in the town, and Alan was anxiously waiting for her. You're back. Seeing Gu Shengyin, he stood up happily. Originally, he wanted to go with her, but Her Majesty the Queen sternly stopped him from going. Gu Shengyin nodded and smiled. We can go back to the Starlight Forest. Hearing this, Alan showed a happy smile. After staying in the human world for 6 years, he was used to seeing all kinds of good and evil, and he missed the pure beauty of the Starlight Forest. 6 years was not a long time for the elves, but it was not short either. The return of the two was undoubtedly welcomed by the elves. Your Majesty the Queen, a new elf is coming to this world. A female elf happily shared the good news with Gu Shengyin. This was indeed good news. The elves usually relied on the elven mother tree to breed new members. In the past, it was good to have 1 or 2 little elves born every 1,000 years. However, since the birth of Elenmere 1,000 years ago, the elves had already given birth to several little elves. For the elves who regarded the elves as treasures, this was simply a joyous event. Alan's popularity in the elves also increased. It was said that Alan's birth brought good luck to the elves. Gu Shengyin also showed a happy smile when she heard the news. After living in the elves for so many years, she really had a good impression of this pure and kind race. Naturally, she was also very happy about this kind of thing. On the day of the birth of the elves, all the elves changed into festive clothes and stood in front of the elven mother tree, waiting for the arrival of a new life. Everyone's face was full of anticipation, except for Alan. Alan felt that he might be sick. It was a joyous event like the birth of the elves, and everyone was very happy, but he did not feel the slightest bit of joy. In fact, when he stood beside the Queen and saw that she was just like all the other clansmen, her light green eyes were filled with joy, and she held great expectations for the new life that was about to be born. He actually had a dark thought in his heart. He was not happy. He was not happy that the Queen's attention was completely attracted by other things. Once again, Alinar was vexed about why he had to reach adulthood so early. If he was still in his infantile state, Her Majesty the Queen would have paid more attention to him. While he was letting his imagination run wild, the surrounding clansmen suddenly let out low cries of joy. The little fairy was born. just like Alan's when he was first born. The elves' appearance and their strength. The stronger they were, the closer they were closer to adulthood. The appearance and the appearance of the elves' appearance was the appearance of the elves when they were born. Her soft green hair hung loosely on her shoulders. Her long eyelashes flickered, and her big eyes were filled with curiosity towards this world. She looked at her clansmen without any fear of strangers, and giggled from her mouth. "What a beautiful little fellow!" After the little child looked around at everyone, she walked to Gu Shengyin's side and hugged her leg. Alan's face suddenly darkened. Chapter 492. Gu Shengyin also looked at the newborn elf in astonishment. What was the meaning of this? However, the little girl refused to let go after hugging Gu Shengyin. She even leaned her little face against Gu Shengyin's skirt. Her big, adorable eyes were shining brightly as she said, "I like you." The surrounding elves were also surprised. They did not expect that other than Alan, there would be a second elf who was not afraid of the queen's aura. Some of the elves showed a look of disappointment. It seemed that the idea of becoming the elf's guardian was hopeless. Gu Shengyin looked down at the little elf who refused to let go of him, and was a little hesitant. This little fellow was very beautiful and adorable, but he didn't treat her as soft-hearted as he did with Alan Eyre. He couldn't bear to see the slightest bit of disappointment on his face. Thinking about it this way, although she did not recognize Alan at the beginning, the familiarity that came from the soul could not be deceived. However, it was really hard for him to harden his heart when such a young and adorable little fellow looked at him with such a dependent gaze. However, she did not have to think about it for long. The little elf on her lap was suddenly held by a pair of hands. It was Alan. Alan smiled at the little elf who was focused on his face. It was like a spring flower blooming, and the little elf's eyes were full of stars. "I like you very much, Ailey." He gently called out the little elf's name. "Are you willing to let me be your guardian?" The little elf was fascinated by his smile. When she heard his question, she had already forgotten that she liked the queen the most at the beginning. She hurriedly nodded, and her words were not particularly clear. "I like Ellie, like." This meant that she was willing. Alan smiled, hugged little Ailey, and bowed to Gu Shengyin. "I am very sorry, Your Majesty. I really like little Ailey. Can I be her guardian, teach her, and love her until she becomes an adult?" Although Gu Shengyin didn't know why Alan would suddenly be interested in this little elf, she was relieved to see that someone had accepted Ali. She smiled and said, "As long as both of you are willing, the goddess of nature will bless you." And so, the matter was settled. Many elves looked at Alan with envy. Alan had just reached adulthood. He would be able to raise a little fairy. When would there be a cute little baby that liked him? Ali was arranged to live in Elenmir's treehouse. Since Elenmir came of age, he had moved out of the queen's palace. Gu Shengyin originally thought that Alan would not be so clingy to her in the future, but she did not expect that Alan would come to her palace that night. Seeing that something seemed to have happened to Alan, Gu Shengyin dismissed the maid beside her and asked with concern, "Alan, what happened to you?" Alan had been thinking that he was very strange these days. He thought that he might be sick or under some kind of black magic. Otherwise, why would he have feelings of jealousy and disgust towards the elves of the same race, and even the little elf that had just been born? He thought about it for a long time, and finally decided to confess to his most beloved and respected queen. "Your Majesty, I seem to be sick." Chapter 493. Gu Shengyin was worried. "Allenby, what's wrong?" Allenby began to speak slowly. "I don't know when it started, but my attention has always been on you, Your Majesty. I found more and more that when I see Your Majesty smiling at others, I feel unhappy. When I see Your Majesty's gentle expression towards others, I feel jealous. I hope Your Majesty's eyes can always stay on me." Allenby's expression was very distressed. He looked at Gu Shengyin with melancholy. "Your Majesty, is Allenby cursed?" When Gu Shengyin heard him speak, she understood what was going on. Her lover, even if he did not understand love at all, even if he was not aware of his own feelings, but the possessiveness that came from the depths of his soul still existed. Gu Shengyin was very happy. Since Allenby now had such thoughts, then he was not far from leaving the aperture. She had to guide him slowly. Gu Shengyin frowned slightly, looking a little distressed. Allenby looked at her, but his heart was in pain. He regretted coming to the queen. It seemed that he had brought trouble to her. Gu Shengyin was actually just thinking about the appropriate words. She thought for a moment and pointed to a vase next to her. Allenby, if you came tomorrow and found that this vase was taken away by other elves, would you be sad? Allenby thought for a moment and shook his head. Gu Shengyin continued, then, if the starlight flower that I gave you was taken away by others, would you be unhappy? Allenby nodded honestly. Gu Shengyin asked again, then, do you know that when something is taken away by others, you have two feelings? Allenby actually had an answer in his heart, because I care about the latter. Why do you care? Allenby answered without hesitation this time, because the starlight flower was given to Allenby by Her Majesty, and Allenby likes Her Majesty. Gu Shengyin smiled. So you see, Alan, you have those feelings because you care about me too much. I'm very happy that Alan likes me. Allenby did not expect that after saying such selfish words, Her Majesty the Queen did not blame him, but instead comforted and enlightened him. His mood suddenly brightened, but he was still puzzled. But Your Majesty, selfishness and jealousy are all wrong. They shouldn't exist. Yes. Alan Eyre, I'm very happy that you came to me after discovering the problem. Gu Shengyin looked at him gently. You've just become an adult, and your temperament isn't mature enough. All of this is just because you're too dependent on me, the guardian. You have not hurt anyone because of these emotions, Alan. There is no need to be unhappy about it. Does Her Majesty mean that my current state is normal? Alan always felt that something was wrong. But the Queen would never be wrong. Aliner said to himself. Gu Shengyin guided him patiently. If you're still confused, why don't you read more books? There are countless wisdom and the experience of your predecessors. In that, maybe you can find the answer you want. After sending away the problematic lover Allenby, Gu Shengyin used her mind to sweep through the largest and oldest library in the elven race. Yes, all the love guides from the human world were moved out and placed in the outermost place that could be seen at a glance. Chapter 494. Allenby went to the library obediently. In fact, he didn't know what book he should look for. Perhaps it should be a book like How to Control Your Emotions. But when he came to the library, the first thing he saw were rows of bookshelves, all of which were Secret Love, How to Pursue the Object of Love, and Love Book. Allenby felt as if he was hallucinating. Were there such books in the library? After so many years in the human world, he had a certain understanding of the feelings between men and women, but he had only seen a little and never paid attention to it seriously. The elves were a race with very little emotional needs. Perhaps it should be said that they were very loving everything in nature and all the beautiful things. On the contrary, they didn't care so much about the feelings between men and women. It was not that there were no couples among the elves, but they were relatively rare. Usually, Allenby had no interest in these books, but today, he suddenly secretly took a few books. The elves never needed to register when they took books, because there was never such a thing as not returning a book after borrowing it. 2 days later, Allenby really listened to the advice of Her Majesty the Queen and read the book seriously. This reading opened the door to a new world for him. Love. Was it actually like this? The book said that one's eyes would unconsciously follow a person, hoping that her attention would be focused on oneself. Seeing that she cared about others, one would feel jealous and selfishly want to monopolize her. These phenomena were clearly the performance of liking a person. It was not the kind of love that was respected and trusted, but the love between a man and a woman. Allenby suddenly panicked. Had he always had such thoughts about the Queen? He carefully compared his own situation with the book and found that he was completely in line with the book. This made him even more confused. Who was Her Majesty the Queen? In the eyes of all the elves, she was the spokesperson of the goddess of nature in the magic fantasy continent. She was the most noble and inviolable existence in the hearts of all the elves. How could he have such thoughts about the queen? Gu Shengyin hadn't seen Allenby for several days. She had been secretly paying attention to him and naturally knew what he had been doing recently. This child, he should be very confused recently, right? Gu Shengyin had no intention of helping him at all. Instead, she was interested to see what he would do. Elder Allen hadn't come to the palace for a long time. When even the maids in the palace felt that something was wrong, Allen finally appeared in front of Gu Shengyin. "Allen, you haven't been here for a long time. Did something happen?" Gu Shengyin looked at Allen carefully. "Very good." His expression was calm, and his eyes were gentle. She could not see any emotions. Allen's heart trembled when he heard the queen's voice. For the past few days, ever since he had recognized his own feelings, he had been constantly trying to mentally prepare himself. He planned to hide this rebellious thought deep in his heart and not let anyone see it. Her Majesty the Queen treated all elves equally, with the same tolerance and care. If she discovered his feelings, Allen did not dare to think of the consequences. Chapter 495. However, no matter how many hints he made in his heart, the moment he saw the queen, the moment he heard her ask him, "What's wrong?" Alinar found that the defense in his heart that he had built for several days almost collapsed. Alinar's eyelashes fluttered, and he lowered his head. He was afraid that facing the queen now, she would easily see through his thoughts that he could not hide at all. How could Gu Shengyin not see his discomfort? It was rare to see such a lover. In the previous world, this man was always very domineering. She could not help but want to see more of such an obedient Alinar. She walked down from the throne and came to the side of the male elf with his head down. The two were very close, and Alinar could clearly smell the fragrance of the queen's hair. "Alinar, you look very wrong. Tell me, what happened?" The queen stood in front of him, and her soft voice sounded in his ears. Alinar knew that at this time, her gentle and beautiful green eyes were looking at him. He took a deep breath, raised his head, and bumped into the soft spring water that could make people drown. "I'm fine, Your Majesty." Alinar tried to make himself look no different than usual. But the next moment, a pair of soft hands touched his wrist. Alinar knew that the queen did not mean anything else, but he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. Gu Shengyin just tilted her head and carefully checked his body. "Well, it seems that my Alinar is indeed fine." Gu Shengyin took back her hand. It turned out that she just thought that he was not feeling well. The warm touch on his hand disappeared, and Alinar suppressed the faint reluctance in his heart. But he saw the queen suddenly raise a mischievous smile that was very different from usual. She even winked a little playfully. "I know, Alinar must have something on his mind. There must be a little secret that he does not want to tell me." Her rare naughtiness made Alan's eyes widen. It turned out that Her Majesty the Queen also had such a childish appearance. She wasn't always so high and mighty as to treat everyone equally. Then, could he also hope that this queen, one day in the future, would also accept a feeling from him? Alinar's heart was burning, but in the next moment, he heard the queen's words. "My Alinar, as an unqualified guide, I was not able to accompany you in the most important 1,000 years. In the future, I hope that, if you have anything, you can tell me." Gu Shingin's tone, as if she was talking to a junior who had not grown up. "She still treats me as an elf who has not grown up." Alinar thought gloomily. "Your Majesty, Alan is already an adult," he said to Gu Shingin with a straight face. Gu Shingin's eyes were full of smiles as if he was looking at an unreasonable child. "Yes, I know. Alan Eyre is already an adult." It was a perfunctory tone of coaxing. Alan Eyre didn't know why, but an impulse came up in his heart. He suddenly took a step forward and hugged the queen who he had always regarded as a god in his heart. The woman in front of him clearly did not expect this to happen. She looked at him with a little surprise. Alinar used all of his courage on this hug, and suddenly he did not know what to do. Chapter 496. Alan looked at the elven queen in his arms. She usually looked so high and unapproachable, but when she was in his arms, she was just a slender and soft person who only reached his shoulders. Alan's face was a little red, and he stuttered, "Your Majesty, Alan has grown up, and I am an adult male elf." He reached out his hand and compared the height difference between the two, clearly expressing his meaning. Gu Shengyin laughed out loud. Alan looked at her smiling face in his arms. Unlike the gentle and light smile of the queen in the past, the queen in front of him smiled brightly. At a glance, he could see that it was the kind of happy smile that came from the bottom of her heart. Alan suddenly felt that whether she thought he was childish or not, as long as he could make her smile like this, it was enough. His mood suddenly became less nervous. He let go of his arms, took a step back, and bowed to Gu Shengyin. "I am really sorry, please forgive my rudeness." Gu Shengyin did not blame him. There was a slight change in the relationship between the two. Alan still respected the queen as before, but he no longer regarded her as a high and untouchable existence. He hid his feelings in the bottom of his heart and looked at her silently. In the eyes of other elves, the relationship between the two seemed to be more intimate than before. Alinar had another worry, the little elf named Ally. At first, he saw that she seemed to like the queen very much. In a moment of impulse, Alan did not hesitate to use his beauty and took the initiative to ask to be Ally's guardian. Now, it seemed that he had taken on a big trouble. Alan dared to swear to the goddess of nature that he had never seen such a naughty little elf. He was so obedient when he was young, and other elves were also soft and cute. Why did he meet such a little weirdo here? Elder Alan, did little Ally disappear again? The elves on the road saw Alan and showed an "I know" expression. Ally was now famous. She and Elder Alan would put on a "You find me, I hide" show every day. There was even one time, it was said that Elder Alan actually found Ally in the nest of a forest python. Goddess of nature. The elves who heard the news all had great sympathy for Elder Elenmere. At the same time, he was secretly glad that little Ailey had taken a fancy to Elder Alan's beauty and didn't choose him. If it were them, they wouldn't be able to handle such a lively little elf. Alan was busy with little Ally, but Gu Shengyin was very relaxed. Ever since she returned from Lock Town, she had been paying attention to Cecily on and off. Now that she Lily was 16 years old, she didn't have any heaven-defying good luck like in the original plot. She also didn't often encounter any unlucky things in that small town, so she was relieved. From the looks of it, she Lily's side was really fine. Gu Shengyin, who was relieved of the burden in her heart, watched Alan being tormented by little Ailey every day, but she couldn't bear to teach him a lesson. It was really a good show. Until the system suddenly told her a message. "What did you say?" She stood up from the throne in shock. Chapter 497. The system had just told her that there was another person with heaven-defying luck in the human world. Cecily was still in Lock Town, so who was that person? System, are you sure that the new person is the same as Cecily in the original plot? She also relies on stealing other people's luck to strengthen herself? Gu Shengyin asked. The system was very sure. That's right. Also, I have to tell you something. The person who took over Cecily's body back then did not die. This time, she is still the one causing trouble. Gu Shengyin was really shocked this time. She clearly shot an arrow through Cecily's body and saw the black shadow disappear. The system was also there at that time. In other words, that thing did not only hide from her, but also from the system. System, do you know what that thing is? The system searched for a while. I can confirm that it is not a creature of this world. There is no such race in this world, the Fantasia continent. The system secretly despised the laws of this world. The host could hide from the laws of this world because she had a cheat in her hand. Someone helped her to hide from the laws of heaven. That black shadow was an outsider, but the laws of this world did not notice it. Really? The system did not know how to describe it. Gu Shengyin frowned. If I don't know what race it is, how do I know how to destroy it? The system, wait a moment. Gu Shengyin looked at the white light that flashed on its body. A palm-sized, very simple-looking small brocade pouch appeared in Gu Shengyin's hand. This is an artifact that is specially used to seal unknown outsiders. Gu Shengyin looked at the inconspicuous little brocade pouch in her hand and asked curiously, "There's actually a special item. System, is there a host who specializes in solving illegal outsiders?" The system was surprised by her sharp senses and nodded, "Yes, we have many different types of tasks. There are also a variety of selected hosts to complete the tasks." Gu Shengyin was very curious about this. "Are they all created like me?" The system explained, "The host situation is rather unique. Most of the hosts are selected from various planes. Humans who meet the requirements are usually people with very strong wills." Seeing that Gu Shengyin still wanted to ask more questions, the system, which had already revealed a lot, hurriedly said, "Host, please deal with this outsider as soon as possible." Although there was no explicit rule stating that these things could not be disclosed to the host, the default rule was to refuse to disclose them to the host. It was already breaking the rules. If the host asked more questions later, such as the topic of mission completion rate, it was afraid that the host's imagination would run wild after it gave the answer. Only her own host was not restricted by the completion of the mission. In other words, whether the mission was successful or not, it had no effect on her. The system had never received any instructions regarding punishment. Compared to other hosts who would be killed if they couldn't reach a certain mission requirement, his own host was definitely the most pampered and loved one. However, her identity was also unique. The host thought to himself, "In this world, there was no such thing as fairness." Gu Shengyin had been with the system for so many worlds, so she understood it quite well. She knew that it was obviously trying to change the topic. Perhaps there were some things that were not suitable for her to know. However, one day, I will know everything that I want to know, she thought silently. Chapter 498. Gu Shengyin informed the elders of his clan that he was going to make a trip to the human world. Alinor wanted to go with her, but was rejected by Gu Shengyin. After all, she was going to deal with an unknown enemy, and she didn't want Alinor to take the risk with her. Alinor looked a little down, but didn't say anything. Gu Shengyin felt that time was tight, so she left after a brief explanation. It wasn't that she was impatient, but the Cecily that would bring disaster to the elves was no longer a threat, but according to the system, it didn't matter whether it was Cecily or not. The key was that the shell of the thing that was still alive in this world hadn't changed. If it was allowed to continue developing, it was likely that it would bring trouble to the elf clan. Since the system had already noticed the existence of the outsider, Gu Shengyin went straight to where it was. What surprised Gu Shengyin was that the thing chose a person who was much more powerful than Cecily this time. It was the princess of the human empire. Princess Andis was a very talented genius in magic, so it didn't cause much of an impact after it took over her body. At most, everyone thought that the princess's talent was getting better as she grew older. Since Gu Shengyin had something provided by the system, he naturally didn't have to worry about anything. On the first night of his arrival in the imperial capital, he cast a sleeping spell and went directly to the princess's bedroom. "Who are you?" Andis, who was about to lie down and sleep, looked at Gu Shengyin warily. In fact, when Andis said this, she already knew the identity of the person in front of her. Gu Shengyin didn't disguise herself this time. Such an obvious elf appearance, such a beautiful and flawless face, and such a powerful aura. Who else could it be other than the Elven Queen? Andis wanted to sound the alarm, but it was useless. Gu Shengyin had cast a barrier around this place. "It's useless," Gu Shengyin said softly. "In this world, there were only 2 people who had the ability to break my enchantment. Now, there is only one person left." Andy's expression changed. She understood the meaning behind Gu Shengyin's words. She was referring to the human emperor and the golden dragon king. Since the fall of the human emperor 1,000 years ago, there was only one person left in this world who could go against the Elven Queen. Oh, I almost forgot about you. Perhaps if you don't die today, you will be able to do it a long, long time later. Gu Shengyin was right. In the original plot, She Lily became the #1 expert in the fantasy continent. Andis's expression changed. She forced a smile and said, "I don't deserve such praise from your majesty. I want to know how I, Andis, offended your majesty to make you say something like this." Andis had clearly stated that she was here to take her life. Gu Shengyin didn't take out her bow to hide her identity this time. Instead, she summoned the Elven Queen's scepter. "Andis didn't offend me, but you did. She Lily." Gu Shengyin softly called out the name that made her expression change. "It's you." Andis suddenly realized. She looked at Gu Shengyin with resentment. Andis knew that she was She Lily. She was obviously the elf in a locked town. Chapter 499. Andis knew that Gu Shengyin had seen through her disguise. She couldn't help but scream, "I've been very cautious ever since I came to this world. I've never provoked an enemy I couldn't afford to provoke, and I've never offended you elves. Why do you have to go against me? You've even tried to kill me 3 times. 3 times? Gu Shengyin caught the main point in her words. Andis looked at her and knew that she hadn't recognized her the first time. She was the one who had exposed herself. But so what? She wasn't going to let her go. 1,000 years ago, have you forgotten? Human sovereign Wuxin fell at the hands of you and Beeman's. Speaking of this, Andis' heart was bleeding. At that time, she was at the peak of her power. It wasn't easy to take advantage of the fact that the human sovereign was seriously injured while he was researching magic. She took the opportunity to seize the right to use that body. That was the strongest cultivator on the Fantasia continent. Andis was confident that as long as she had enough time, she could combine the Ranhuang realm with her original strength. At that time, it would be a piece of cake for her to rule the entire Fantasia continent. But the Elven Queen found out. In that battle, the human sovereign's body fell. She was lucky enough to escape with a wisp of her soul, but her power was greatly reduced and her soul was almost destroyed. In order to keep her soul from being destroyed, she had to seal her own soul and wait for the fated one to come. This wait lasted for 1,000 years. Then, she waited for a long time and waited for Lily. Even if the other party's talent wasn't good, she was confident that she could return to the peak with her own strength. However, he just had to meet a meddlesome elf. In that battle, she once again relied on faking her death to escape the calamity, but her vitality was still greatly damaged, and the accumulation of 1,000 years of recuperation was all gone. Later, she learned to be careful. After wandering for a long time, she finally found a suitable host in the capital. Princess Andis was not only talented, but also arrogant and unsociable. She was the perfect candidate. After she obtained the right to use this body, she changed her previous high profile and lived in seclusion. As expected, she didn't arouse the slightest suspicion. She originally thought that this time, she would finally be able to cultivate steadily until she returned to the peak. When the time came, he would definitely teach those elves, who had ruined his plans twice, a lesson. Unfortunately, before she could recover her strength, the elf came looking for her again. The same elf had ruined her plans 3 times. "Why is he haunting me like a ghost?" While she was cursing angrily, Gu Shengyin was suddenly enlightened. Back then, she had discovered that the person wasn't the real human sovereign Wu Xin, but she hadn't discovered her true identity. He didn't expect her to be the same person as She Lily. Since that was the case, all the more he couldn't let her live this time. Even a cultivator at the level of Ranhuang could be taken advantage of by her. Such an ability was really chilling. Her expression was cold as she said to Andis, "Since you've already told me, I presume you don't plan on leaving this place alive?" Andis laughed and said, "Elf Queen, I admit that you are very strong, and I am far from being your opponent. But aren't you overconfident? Have you forgotten how I managed to escape from you the last few times? The reason why she dared to be so honest was because she was confident that she could escape from the hands of the person in front of her. Chapter 500. She seemed to know that she was no match for Gu Shengyin. When Gu Shengyin cast a nature magic, she did not avoid it, but went straight for it. Andis fell limply to the ground. Gu Shengyin watched as a wisp of black mist emerged from Andis's body, forming a distorted face in the air. The face smiled viciously at her. "Elven Queen, so what if you found me? I'll see how you're going to erase me." After saying this, the illusory face seemed to be in great pain. It wriggled a few times and disappeared without a trace. The situation was exactly the same as last time. If they hadn't known about it beforehand, everyone would have thought that this thing had already disappeared from the world. This time, Gu Shengyin deliberately used detection magic to scan the surroundings. As expected, she could not find any trace of it. She had to admit that this thing's concealment ability was superb. However, it was too early for her to rejoice. Gu Shengyin took out the small brocade pouch that the system gave her from the space ring on her hand. The small brocade pouch laid flat on her hand. At this moment, it suddenly floated up on its own and spun in the air. Gu Shengyin saw that there seemed to be a faint light flashing from within. Then, from a corner, there seemed to be a scream. Gu Shengyin stared blankly at the empty space in front of her. A wisp of black mist suddenly appeared. The thing seemed to be very frightened and screamed uneasily. "What did you take out? How can there be something in this world that can detect my existence?" Ah! The brocade pouch seemed to have a great suppressive effect on her. Gu Shengyin heard her voice and knew that she must be in great pain. However, she did not have the slightest bit of pity. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. If this thing did not use such a despicable method to increase her strength, she would not have to spend so much effort to deal with her. In the end, the black mist could not resist and was sucked into the brocade pouch. Gu Shengyin could even hear her wails of pain and curses of disbelief. She threw the thing in her hand to the system. "It's done. But, can you shut her up?" The system kept the thing inside. She did not know what it did, but the whole world suddenly quieted down. Once the thing was in the system's hands, it could not go wrong. This time, Gu Shengyin was really relieved. Finally, the hidden danger of this world was removed. Gu Shengyin cast nature magic on the unconscious Princess Andis. When she wakes up, her body will return to normal and forget everything that happened during this period of time. Andis was an innocent person. Gu Shengyin did not know that after she returned to the elves for the elves. As soon as she returned, she was informed that Elder had been waiting for her for 2 days and 2 Ellis elves. Gu Shengyin was worried. Something big must have happened. Otherwise, Ellis would not be like this. But as soon as she entered the palace, she was greeted with a warm embrace. Ellis' hands were very tight, as if he was afraid that the person in his arms would disappear if he loosened his grip. Gu Shengyin was even more worried. What happened that made Ellis, who had been trying so hard to suppress his feelings, suddenly burst out with such intense emotions? Chapter 501. After a long time, Alan let go of the queen in his arms. This time, Gu Shengyin saw it clearly. The emotions in his eyes were not hidden at all. It was so strong that it could drown a person. "Your Majesty, fortunately you are okay." Alan's voice startled Gu Shengyin. How could it be so hoarse? She didn't know that since the night she left, Alan had been repeating a dream. He dreamed that he was deceived by a strange human woman. After that, the elven mother tree in the Holy Land was stolen by her, and the entire elven race fell into a tragedy. He watched Her Majesty the Queen, for the entire elven race, give up her life without hesitation and become the new elven mother tree. This was the first time Alinar woke up from this dream, and he felt that this dream was so absurd. Not to mention that his heart was with the Queen. How could he be bewitched by a human woman who casually came to him? Not to mention that there had never been any outsiders in the elven race. But everything in the dream was too real, and it made him worried about the Queen who left the Starlight Forest. After that, the second day, the third day, and the fourth day, when Alan was awakened by the same dream every night, he finally panicked. The elves were simple and didn't think much in their hearts. They rarely dreamed. What's more, for magicians like them, when they cultivated to a certain level, sometimes some prophecies would appear in their eyes in the form of dreams. Could it be that the scene in the dream was something that would happen in the future? Alan was shocked by his own guess and broke out in a cold sweat. No, it's impossible. How could I make such a mistake? How could Her Majesty the Queen have such an ending? He couldn't sit still day and night. Since there was nothing major in the elven race, he simply went to the Elven Queen's palace and waited for her return. That was why the scene that had just happened. Alan Eyre didn't hide anything and told him everything that happened in his dream. During this time, he kept looking at the Queen in front of him without blinking. How could such a queen die? He absolutely couldn't allow that to happen. Gu Shengyin was very surprised after listening to his narration. The dream that Arundel had was obviously the ending of the Elven Queen in the original plot. The physical fitness of the elves was very strong, but at present, Alan's eyes were bloodshot. Obviously, he had not rested well for a long time. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but feel a little distressed. She raised her hand slightly and cast a spell. Alan only felt a cool and gentle energy spread all over his body, and the tiredness of the past few days instantly dissipated. Gu Shengyin comforted him softly. Alan, it's just an illusory dream. Trust me, it won't come true. Alan's expression warmed up when he heard that. Gu Shengyin was relieved. Only then did he realize that their posture seemed to be a little ambiguous. At this moment, although Alan Eyre had let go of her, his hands were still wrapped around her waist. There was only a thin layer of clothing between them. Gu Shengyin could even feel the heat from his body. Alan Eyre also seemed to react. But he didn't let go. Instead, he used a little force to pull the person in his arms closer. The two people's bodies were really close together. Meeting the Queen's slightly surprised eyes, Alan Eyre smiled slightly. By the way, Your Majesty the Queen, I still have an important thing to tell you. Chapter 502. Alan said to the Queen in front of him, I like Your Majesty the Queen. When he said this, his eyes were looking at Gu Shengyin without blinking. Alan only felt that there was no way to stop the thoughts in his heart. Ever since that dream, there was no way to hide the thoughts that wanted to come out. He felt that if something unexpected happened in the future, the confession that he had not said would inevitably become his deepest regret. At worst, he would just be rejected, he thought. At worst, he would just be rejected by the Queen. He could still stand far away, watch over her, and protect her. Gu Shengyin looked deeply at Alan, who had grown into an adult man in front of her. His shoulders were very wide, enough to shelter anyone from the wind and rain. She thought that with Alan's temperament, one day he would confess to her, but she did not think that this day would come so soon. Perhaps, that dream had really scared him out of his wits. Gu Shengyin suddenly felt a surge of pity in her heart. She curved her lips, gently raised her hand, and hugged the waist of Alan, who was nervously waiting for the verdict. I also like Alan very much. The Queen's lips overflowed with a sigh. Alan's eyes widened in disbelief. He thought of many possibilities. The Queen might coldly reject him and chase him out of the palace for daring to offend her. Or the gentle Queen might tactfully reject him. Or she might just take his words as a joke. He did not dare to think about the possibility that he longed for the most deep in his heart. However, Her Majesty the Queen had said the words I like you. Alan was ecstatic, but he was also a little nervous. He was afraid that the like that the Queen said was not what he thought it meant. Maybe the Queen did not understand what he meant at all. Alan, who had countless thoughts in his mind, was completely stunned after hearing Gu Shengyin's words. It was as if his whole body was frozen in place. Gu Shengyin looked at the surprised and shocked lover in front of her and sighed in her heart. She tiptoed slightly and kissed the corner of his lips. Their lips separated as soon as they touched. However, it woke up Alan, who was still in a daze. By the time he regained his senses, Her Majesty had already left his embrace. Alan touched his lips with his hand. Just now, Her Majesty the Queen actually kissed him? Alan couldn't tell what he was feeling. So, Her Majesty also liked him? It turned out that Her Majesty actually liked him. He looked ecstatically at Gu Shengyin, who was standing not far away. The other party seemed to know what he was thinking and nodded with a smile. Alan couldn't suppress a smile on his face. His face was a little red, and he suddenly whispered, "Your Majesty, can I kiss you?" Gu Shengyin secretly thought that even lovers could have such a shy and innocent moment. She did not answer, but looked at him with a smile. Alan understood what she meant. He walked to her side and looked at his queen with a sincere and loving gaze. Then, he gently kissed her. Gu Shengyin could feel the treasure and love in this kiss, as well as a trace of cautiousness. The innocent Alan did not even know how to kiss. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his waist, stuck out the tip of her tongue, and licked his lips suggestively. Alan's heart moved, and he pried open Gu Shengyin's lips without a teacher, and was ready to attack. "Uncle Alan." A little girl pushed open the door of the hall with a bang, and looked curiously at the two people who were hugging each other. Chapter 503. Alan regretted for the 1000th time that he had chosen to be Ali's guardian. This little guy always came at such a time to make his presence known. As soon as the palace door was opened, Gu Shengyin had already moved aside. It was better not to let the little elf see this. However, no matter how fast he moved, Ali still saw Uncle Alan hugging Her Majesty the Queen. She ran over and hugged Gu Shengyin. She raised her head and blinked her big eyes, which were so adorable that they could melt a fairy's heart. "Your Majesty the Queen, Ali also wants a kiss." Gu Shengyin smiled. She was about to bend down and pick up Ali when the person on her lap disappeared. It turned out that Alan had already carried her away. Alan's face was extremely dark at this moment. No one would be happy to have their good fortune interrupted. He looked at Ali seriously. "Ali, don't you remember the etiquette I taught you? You have to knock on the door before entering and get permission from the owner." Ali blinked her eyes and said, "Uncle Alan, why do you want to kiss Her Majesty the Queen?" Alan had a headache. This little devil knew how to change the topic at such a young age. Sometimes he really doubted whether Ali was really an elf. He had never met such a worrisome elf. Before he could say anything, Ali shouted first, "Uncle Alan, I want to kiss Her Majesty the Queen." Alan's face was cold. "No way." Ali pouted. "I don't want to kiss Uncle Alan. Her Majesty the Queen can do the same." After that, she looked at the elf queen that she had been drooling for a long time. Under the gaze of two pairs of eyes, Gu Shengyin smiled gently at Ali. Her Majesty the Queen's smile was very lethal. Ali's whole elf body was dizzy. Then she heard the Queen's cold and ruthless words. "No way, little Ali. Your Uncle Alan doesn't want me to be kissed by you." Little Ali looked at the smiling Queen and then looked at Uncle Alan, who was holding her with a proud face. This time, she really puckered her lips and cried out with a wah sound. "Her Majesty the Queen and Uncle Alan are too despicable. Her Majesty the Queen is going to marry Elder Alan." This news was like a sudden gust of wind, instantly spreading throughout the entire forest. Many elves who admired the two of them were dumbfounded. They hadn't even started to fall in love, yet they had already fallen out of love. However, most of the elves were lost in their own reverie. In the future, Her Majesty the Queen and Elder Alan would appear together. The scene of two of the most beautiful elves of the elven race appearing together was so dreamy just thinking about it. Surprisingly, not a single elf objected to this matter. All the elves expressed their blessings to the two. This was what Gu Shengyin liked the most about the elves. They were pure and clean-minded. No matter what happened, they would always think of the best. This was also the reason why she announced the news of her marriage as soon as possible. Alan Eyre felt that everything that had happened recently was like an unbelievably beautiful dream. If it wasn't a dream, Why did the things that he desired the most in his heart all come true? No, it was even better than what he wanted the most. He used to think that it would be best if the queen could respond to his love. However, the reality was that not only did she respond to his feelings, she even held a wedding. Chapter 504. The wedding was held in the Elf Palace in the Starlight Forest. The day of the wedding was the busiest day in the Starlight Forest in the past 1,000 years. Not only the elves, but many other races were also allowed to enter the Starlight Forest to give their blessings to the queen. Even Beemans of the Dragon Clan came in person. He looked at the woman he had admired for thousands of years with melancholy. Seeing her with another elf, his face was full of undisguised happiness. Beemans sighed in the end. No matter how he chased, this woman would not belong to him in the end. Among all the guests, the most eye-catching ones were the natives of the Starlight Forest. There were groups of unicorns carrying the freshest and sweetest fruits in the forest on their backs to congratulate the queen. There were birds holding the most beautiful flowers in their beaks and pinned them on the queen's clothes. All the flowers in the Starlight Forest bloomed on the same day, turning this place into the most dreamy place in the whole fantasy continent. The Elven Queen and Alan, who were dressed in splendid attire, walked out. The appearance of the two of them made everything around them seem dull and dull. The two exchanged vows in front of the Elven Queen's statue and became partners for life. This celebration lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The elves discovered that after the wedding, their queen and elder Alan had gone missing. The other elders who knew the truth recalled the queen's words at that time. Now that there is nothing to do in the clan, Alan and I plan to go around the fantasy continent. I will leave the clan's matters to you. When saying this, Her Majesty's hand was still tightly clasped with Alan's. The elders who were forced to swallow a bowl of dog food could only silently accept the work arranged by Her Majesty and wish the queen a happy honeymoon with a smile. The word honeymoon was said by Her Majesty. Oh right, they were also forced to accept the little devil, little Ollie. According to Alan's words, it was not easy for him and the queen to have so much private time. How could they bring Ollie, such a big light bulb, with them? Not to mention, with the little guy's ability to cause trouble, the two of them would not be on a honeymoon, but following behind the naughty child to deal with all kinds of situations. As for Allie waking up to find that her favorite and most beautiful queen and Uncle Allenby had disappeared, that was no longer a matter of the two of them. Gu Shangyin and Alan spent several years touring most of the fantasy continent. Until they arrived at Lock Town. Many years ago, they lived here for 6 years. Up until now, the human world had already changed several groups of people. Gu Shangyin saw Shi Lily. Although the lifespan of humans was short, the lifespan of humans who could practice magic would be extended according to the strength of their magic power. Although Shi Lily didn't have a heaven-defying talent like in the original plot, it wasn't a problem for her to live for more than 1,000 years. Shi Lily had long blonde hair. It was obvious that she was very respected in this small town. She seemed to have started to age. Although she still looked young, Gu Shangyin could already feel that the vitality in her body was fading away. What are you looking at? Alan was a little confused. He didn't remember Cecily at all. Gu Shangyin withdrew her gaze and shook her head. Nothing. No matter what Shi Lily was now, it had nothing to do with her, with Alan, and with the elves. Chapter 505. Xian Xian, let's go shopping today? After school, someone shouted from behind her. Gu Shangyin turned back and smiled embarrassedly. Not today, and Yuan Gij has a basketball game in the afternoon. When the people in the classroom left, Gu Shangyin slowly began to pack her things and sort out the plot of this world. This was a story of a childhood sweetheart who couldn't beat the goddess of reality. The owner of this body, Chong Xian, and her boyfriend, Huang and Yuan, grew up together. Their family conditions were similar and they lived in the same neighborhood. They were completely the true portrayal of childhood sweethearts. Xian Xian was a very simple girl. In her world for more than 10 years, she always thought about getting into a good university and finding a job that could earn money to be filial to her parents. When the two were 15 years old, Huang and Yuan confessed to Chong Xian and the two naturally got together. The two people's relationship was very good and they also went to the same high school. Chong Xian loved Huang and Yuan very much. She felt that according to their relationship, after a few years, they would go to university together and get married and have children. She never doubted that the two would be able to live a sweet life together. She never thought that a man's heart could change. Perhaps she knew that a man's heart could change, but she never counted Huang and Yuan as one of those men. Chong Xian felt that the two people's relationship of more than 10 years was not something that could destroy it. However, reality told her that nothing was impossible. In the beginning, she only heard some rumors. They said that the school's basketball captain, Huang and Yuan, and the school's beauty, Qing Luo Chen, were somewhat close. Qing Luo Chen, as her name suggested, was very beautiful. Even if she was still in high school, even if she hadn't fully grown up, the face that she revealed now was enough to be called gorgeous. At that time, Huang and Yuan and Chong Xian were the model couple in school. Even the teachers in the school knew about the two. But seeing that the two of them had a good relationship and Chong Xian was always the first in the grade and didn't neglect her studies, they didn't say anything. Someone felt that it wasn't worth it for Chong Xian and specially ran over to tell her this news. But Chong Xian didn't believe it. Huang On Yuan was handsome and good at basketball. There were many girls in the school who liked him. It wasn't that there weren't any rumors in the past, but it turned out that those were just groundless rumors. She stubbornly believed in her own judgment until she saw Huang and Yuan and Qing Luo Chen walking hand in hand intimately. Chong Xian was very shocked at that time, but she still remembered to take Huang On Yuan's face into consideration. She didn't go over and question him on the spot. Instead, she asked him to give her an explanation when they went home together at night. Xian Xian, Chen Chen and I are just good friends. Don't believe the rumors outside. Huang On Yuan seemed to be particularly afraid that Chong Xian would misunderstand. He explained and swore that he only had Chong Xian in his heart. Chong Xian chose to believe him. But not long after, she once again saw Huang and accompanying Qing Luo Chen to go shopping. This time, Chong Xian couldn't use the excuse of being good friends as she watched the two of them kiss. On the busy street, he didn't care about the gazes of others. Chong Xian only felt that her heart was cold at that time. She had no way to comfort herself that Huang and Yuan did this kind of thing with another girl when he loved her. She didn't hesitate to break up with Huang and Yuan. Even if she said it out loud, her heart would be cut by a knife. But this kind of man she despised. Chapter 506. To be honest, Gu Shengyin appreciated Chong Xian's character very much. If things ended like this, it wouldn't be much, it would just be a scum changing his love. The turning point was yet to come. After Chong Xian saw that Huang On Yuan was cheating on her, she proposed to break up with him. Logically speaking, Huang On Yuan should be eager to agree to it and then fly away with his new love. But in fact, Huang and Yuan wasn't willing. He begged Chong Xian to give him another chance, saying that he was just obsessed and was seduced by Qing Luo Chen. He still loved Chong Xian. At the end of the day, he had never expected that Chong Xian, who loved him so much, would be so resolute in breaking up with him. Of course Chong Xian wouldn't agree, but at this time Qing Luo Chen came to find her in private, saying that she and Huang and Yuan were truly in love, hoping that Chong Xian could take a step back and help them. "I'll help your whole family." Because of Qing Luo Chen's move, Chong Xian couldn't take it anymore and actually agreed to Huang and Yuan's request. Of course she didn't believe that Huang and Yuan really repented, she just wanted to take revenge on Huang and Yuan and Qing Luo Chen. "Aren't they a scum and a slut? I won't help you, let's see how you have the face to get together." She didn't believe that Huang and Yuan would really repent. In her heart, this kind of man, there would be a second time, just wait and see. Sure enough, Huang and Yuan stayed by Chong Xian's side every day for the first month. After seeing that Chong Xian's attitude was still cold, he gradually returned to his original state. Adding in the fact that a beauty like Qing Luo Chen came crying to him several times, the beauty was like a pear blossom in the rain, she always put him first. It was completely different from Chong Xian's coldness towards him now. Just like that, the two of them got back together. Huang and Yuan only remembered how gentle Qing Luo Chen was now. He completely forgot how Chong Xian used to pour her heart out for him. Qing Luo Chen liked Huang and Yuan, otherwise as the school flower. How many people would be lining up to chase her? If she didn't like him to the extreme, she wouldn't have done something like stealing someone else's boyfriend. But Huang and Yuan was truly a scum. He couldn't let go of the affection he had for Chong Xian since they were young, but he also couldn't bear to let down Qing Luo Chen, this great beauty, who had deep feelings for him. Qing Luo Chen also found out later that Huang and Yuan couldn't bear to part with Chong Xian. As long as she was still around, she would always bear the title of third party. In a moment of impulse, Qing Luo Chen did one thing. She bribed the gangsters around the school to teach Chong Xian a lesson when she came home alone at night. Her original intention was to teach Chong Xian a lesson so that she would know her place and leave Huang on Yuan on her own accord. But in the middle of the night, when a group of hooligans saw Chong Xian, a girl, they actually went crazy and violated her. Chong Xian was dead. The things that Qing Luo Chen did were also investigated. But in the end, the police severely punished those hoodlums and Qing Luo Chen was only charged with a small crime, because what those hoodlums did was not ordered by her. Adding in the fact that Qing Luo Chen's family used some connections, she was actually unharmed in the end. Chong Xian's family was of course unwilling. A good daughter was gone just like that and the main culprit was still free. They continued to call the police and appeal, but in the end, other than wiping out the family's savings, there was no effect at all. Chapter 507. When Gu Shengyin came to this world, Chong Xian and Huang were in their first year of high school. At this time, Huang hadn't met Qing Luo Chen yet, so Chong Xian and Huang were still a couple that everyone admired. Gu Shengyin packed her things and came to the basketball court. Today was the day that Huang An's basketball team was competing with the neighboring school's team. Chong Xian's Lin City Third High School and the neighboring Lin City First High School had always been competitors. The two schools were both key high schools, so the enrollment rate, the guaranteed admission rate, and even the various big and small winning rates, they would fight to the death every year. Chong Xian's arrival made many people reveal a tacit smile. Huang An's roommate directly called her sister-in-law, and one of them shouted at Huang who was warming up, "And Yuan, sister-in-law is here to cheer for you." Huang heard this and looked over. Seeing Gu Shengyin, he revealed a smile, threw the towel in his hand, and walked over. "Xian Xian." Gu Shengyin responded, "This Huang An wasn't her lover. Let's go. I saved a good seat for you." Huang pulled Gu Shengyin's hand and walked over to the court. Gu Shengyin subconsciously shook off his hand. "Xian Xian." Huang looked at her with some surprise. Gu Shengyin's reaction was a conditioned reflex, but she reacted this time. She pretended to pout unhappily. "I saw that you were chatting happily with those girls just now." Huang looked over. It was the school's cheerleaders, a group of young and beautiful girls. So she was jealous. Huang laughed secretly. He said, "Xian Xian, my feelings for you, do you still doubt it? Those are the cheerleaders in the team, I see them as friends, really, there's nothing between me and them." Gu Shengyin rolled her eyes at him in annoyance, and walked over to the court. Huang touched his nose. She looked so angry, but didn't she still choose to cheer for him? Xian Xian's mouth was hard, but her heart was soft. Gu Shengyin rested his chin on his hand and looked at the court in boredom. He was surrounded by girls who had come to see handsome guys. At this moment, they were excitedly shouting words like, "So-and-so is so handsome." She actually couldn't understand these girls, just like how she didn't feel that there was anything beautiful about fighting for the ball on the court. He did not know what had happened at Linqing First High School today, but the members of the team seemed to be on steroids. Even Gu Shengyin, a layman who did not know much about basketball, could see that his school, Linqing Third High School, was going to lose. "Oh, they're going to lose." The girl sitting next to her complained in frustration. She turned around and saw Gu Shengyin sitting at the side with an indifferent expression. "Xian Xian Xian, Xian Xian Xian, how are you still Xian Xian Xian?" That girl looked at her a little angrily, as if Gu Shengyin had done something wrong. According to Gu Shengyin's temper, she didn't want to talk to this kind of person. After all, in Chong Xian's memory, there was no such person at all. But Chong Xian's character was a very innocent and cute girl. She could only blink her big eyes and look at the girl with a confused face. They're playing so fiercely, I'm afraid Brother On Yuan will get hurt. In other words, the reason why she didn't shout with them was because she was too worried about them. Chapter 508. Chong Xian's appearance was delicate and petite. A 15-year-old girl looked like she was only 13 or 14 years old. Being looked at with such an innocent gaze, the girl felt that her tone had been too harsh. She coughed awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry. I just saw that our school isn't in a good state today, so my tone was a little harsh." Her swift apology made Gu Shengyin have a better impression of her. She smiled sweetly and said, "It's okay. You also want our school to win. I understand." Her smile made the girl in front of her sway for a moment. The girl felt that Chong Xian was really too cute and soft. Really, she probably didn't know how to resist even if she was bullied. She looked at Huang On Yuan with jealousy. Huang On Yuan was really lucky to have such an obedient and cute girl as his girlfriend. She said straightforwardly, "My name is Gu Shirley. I'm a senior in the second year of high school. Junior Chong Xian, you suit my taste. In the future, I'll protect you in Lin City's third high school. If anyone dares to bully you, just tell them my name." Gu Shengyin. What kind of strange development is this? She looked at the girl in front of her. She was very tall, had very fair skin, and had good facial features. However, her hair was cut very short and dyed red. She even had earrings in her ears. Gu Shengyin could tell at a glance that the earrings were real diamonds. She thought that this girl named Gu Shirley must be from a good family. However, her outfit. Although Gu Shengyin personally thought that she was quite handsome, in Lin City's third high school, which had always been known for its strict management, it was enough to be considered unconventional. Gu Shirley looked at the little girl in front of her, sizing her up. She knew that a good student like Gu Shengyin would not like a bad student like her. She raised her eyebrows to see her reaction. To her surprise, the girl in front of her didn't have any strange disdain in her clear eyes. On the contrary, there was a hint of appreciation in her eyes. "Aren't you afraid of me?" she asked curiously. Gu Shengyin blinked in confusion. "Why should I be afraid of you?" Gu Shirley pointed at himself. "I'm dressed like a disobedient and bad student. Don't you hate this kind of person the most?" Gu Shengyin smiled. "You can't tell a bad student just by looking at her appearance. You have to see what she has done. Besides, I think you look very handsome in this outfit. However, it would be perfect if you could take off your watch and replace it with a punk bracelet," Gu Shengyin suggested according to the knowledge in her mind. Gu Shirley's eyes lit up. He didn't expect that Chong Xian, who he had only heard of in school and had never seen in person, would bring him such a big surprise. It wasn't just her personality and taste, even her aesthetic sense. "You also know about punk?" She pulled Gu Shengyin aside and the two of them started a heated discussion. Gu Shengyin wasn't interested in basketball to begin with. She felt that Gu Shirley was a nice person, so she simply started chatting with her. Of course, most of the time, it was Gu Shirley who was talking. Gu Shengyin sat quietly on the side and listened. When Huang On Yuan returned to his spectator seats with a dejected expression after losing the game, he realized that his girlfriend, who used to bring him drinks and towels, was gone. Chapter 509. He looked around and saw Gu Shengyin chatting happily with a girl in the corner. Huang On Yuan's heart skipped a beat when he saw the girl chatting with her. He walked in that direction. "Xian." Gu Shengyin turned around and saw him. Her big eyes were filled with joy. "Big brother On Yuan." Looking at Huang On Yuan's jersey, she suddenly realized what she was here for. She lowered her head uneasily and twisted the corner of her shirt with her fingers. She stuck her tongue out at Huang Anyuan. I'm sorry, big brother Anyuan. I just met Sister Shirley and accidentally talked too much. She was originally petite and dainty, and now that she had shrunk her shoulders and looked so pitiful, Huang Anyuan's anger and depression dissipated. However, before he could say anything, Gu Shirley, who was afraid that Gu Shengyin would be scolded, said, Junior Huang, I was the one who dragged Xian Xian here to chat. Don't blame her. Hearing Gu Shirley's words, Huang Anyuan's expression changed, but only for a moment. He smiled and said, Senior Gu, you must be joking. Xian Xian is my girlfriend. I can't wait to dote on her. How could I bear to blame her? Senior Gu, I have something to talk to Xian Xian about. I'll leave first. Huang Anyuan nodded at Gu Shirley and pulled Gu Shengyin away. As Gu Shengyin was being pulled away, she didn't forget to look back. She waved at Gu Shirley with her empty hand. Goodbye, Sister Shirley. How did you provoke her? Huang Anyuan asked worriedly as the two walked to a place where there was no one else. Who? Gu Shengyin was confused. Huang Anyuan didn't have any temper with his ignorant girlfriend. That Gu Shirley. Seeing Gu Shengyin's, so you're talking about her, expression, Huang Anyuan continued, that Gu Shirley isn't an easy person to get along with. I heard that she has connections with people in society. Don't get too close to her. You two are from two different worlds. Gu Shengyin thought that if Chang Xian had to choose a person that she should stay away from, Huang Anyuan would definitely be at the top of the list. Of course, she couldn't say that out loud. On the surface, she could only widen her eyes and look unconvinced. Big Sister Shirley is clearly a very good person. Huang Anyuan felt a headache coming on. Xian Xian had always been very obedient to him. Whatever he told her not to do, she would listen obediently. Why did he become so stubborn now? Could it be the late rebellious phase? Huang Anyuan came up with an idea. While Huang Anyuan was still thinking about when his obedient and cute Xian Xian would recover, Lin City No. 1 Middle School was very lively. I told you, using this method to motivate you, it will definitely work. A tall and handsome boy said loudly. Beside him, a group of people jeered. I say, Genius Lu, we completely crushed those guys from No. 3 Middle School. When will you be able to draw out the key areas of the exam for us? The basketball players from No. 1 Middle School, who had been dominating the court just now, were all smiling obsequiously at a boy in a white shirt. The boy didn't look very old. He was about 15 or 16 years old. His skin was very white, and his facial features were clear. He had a calmness and maturity that didn't belong to his age. Hearing this, he revealed a faint smile. When we get back to school, I'll draw it out for you. Yeah. Chapter 510. Lu Yu was Lin City No. 1 High School's top student. This time, it was Lu Yu's roommate, Zhang Yun, who was instigated by the school's basketball team. He said that he had to find a way to get Genius Lu to sort out the key points of this midterm exam for them. Otherwise, based on their style of not burning incense and cramming at the last minute, they would definitely be finished. Zhang Yun was full of energy to complete the task and dragged Lu Yu to make a bet. Soon, there would be a basketball game between Lin City No. 1 High School and No. 3 High School. After all, they were the teams that won glory for the school. Lu Yu went to watch the game. If No. 1 High School won, Lu Yu would agree to draw out the key points of the exam for the basketball team. Zhang Yun said to the basketball team, Brothers, I can only help you up to this point. Whether or not you can have fun on the weekends will depend on your efforts in this game. That was why the group of players from No. 1 High School risked their lives on the court. Let's go. I'll treat tonight. Lu Yu, come with us. No. 1 High School's basketball captain said happily. The group pulled Lu Yu away without waiting for him to refuse. It was such a coincidence that Huang Anyuan brought Gu Shengyin out for dinner that night. The two schools were close to each other, and there were only a few cheap and good places around them that were suitable for students to consume. Coincidentally, they met. "Oh, isn't this the loser from number 3 high school?" A basketball player from number 1 high school saw Huang On and said in a sarcastic tone. In the blink of an eye, he saw Gu Shengyin beside Huang On and recognized him at a glance. Who was Chong Xian? She was the top student in the first year of Lin City number 3 high school. She represented number 3 high school and won the first prize in the National Intelligent Mathematics competition. She was also the only person who had defeated Lu Yu and made him only win the second prize. "Isn't this Chong Xian from number 3 high school? I heard that you're this guy's girlfriend?" TSK, TSK, TSK. If you ask me, isn't this just a flower stuck in a hole? Huang On was tall and handsome. In terms of appearance, Chong Xian and him were definitely a good match. Since the guy from number 1 high school said that, it was obvious that something was going to happen. Lu Yu frowned when he heard this. Sure enough, Huang On flew into a rage when he heard this. He stepped forward and glared at the other party. It looked like a conflict was about to break out. Gu Shengyin didn't want to cause any trouble just because they came out for a meal. Moreover, the other party obviously had the advantage in numbers. She tugged at Huang On sleeve and waited until he turned around in confusion. Gu Shengyin looked at the first high school student who spoke. "I'm Chong Xian from 3rd high school. You seem to know me? But I'm really sorry, I've never heard of you. Who are you?" "My family and friends will care about what I do, so you don't have to worry about it." When she said this, her tone was very sincere, and her expression did not reveal the slightest bit of arrogance, but no matter who it was, they could hear the thick ridicule in her words. Translated, this sentence meant, "Who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in my business?" Sure enough, the boy was choked, but he couldn't vent his anger on a girl. He could only resentfully say to Huang On, "You actually let a girl stand up for you when something happens. Are you even a man?" Enough. Lu Yu, who had been standing on the side without saying anything, glanced at Gu Shengyin, who was calm and did not show any anger. He turned to the boy and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to treat me to a meal?" When the boy heard Lu Yu's words, he didn't say anything else and brought his people in. When Lu Yu left, he took a deep look at Gu Shengyin. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.